Hello, dear friends. Welcome to this program, Moments with God, where I share with you my simple and humble reflections on the daily Mass readings. And if there is an important saint in the Catholic calendar, then I also share some information and some inspiring aspects of their lives so that those examples from there, all the reflections from the Gospel and the first readings can help us to get deeper into our self-awareness, particularly about the awareness of where we stand in our spiritual life and if we are progressing in our spiritual life. And that is actually our aim for all of us, to be united with God, and I certainly am trying to do that, finding help myself through these reflections, and I hope you too. And if you like the video, you may please share it with others. Thank you. Today is the 3rd of November, the 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time. We are already at the 31st Sunday. Soon it will be the 34th Sunday, and then we will enter into Advent, another liturgical year, and preparing for Christmas, etc. But there is still time for that. Today, the readings are also, as always, quite rich. And the first reading is from the book of Deuteronomy, where what is important for the Jews is emphasized. Because remember, this book of Deuteronomy is written much before Jesus came into the world, and therefore it is talking about what the most important thing for them was, particularly with their spiritual life, with their prayer. And therefore the reading ends with what was important formula of prayer for the Jewish people, which went like this: "Hear, O Israel, the Eternal One is our God, the eternal God alone. Blessed be God's glory forever and ever. He alone is to be loved and to be honored." So, this was the call of prayer by Israelites, by Jewish, both in the morning, which they call Shakarit, and also in the evening, what they call Arvit or Ma'arvi. That means the evening prayer. And both the times they called on, "Oh, hear, O Israel." The whole lot of people of Israel had to remember that eternal God is one. And it is Him alone we worship, and He alone is our God. Because it is this God who saved them from the slavery of the Egyptians and brought them into this free land. And when we come to the Gospel, of course, one of the scribes comes and asks Jesus, "What is the first commandment?" Do you know why he asks these questions? He asks these questions because for the Jews, there used to be hundreds and hundreds of small rules and regulations to guide their life. Various things. There were rules for the elders, there were rules for the young, there were rules for women, there were rules for children, how they should dress up, how they should pray, how they should eat, what they should do. For example, washing of the hands, as it is mentioned in the Gospel too. So that's why this young man, this scribe, wanted to know exactly what is the first commandment. He wanted to clarify with Jesus. And Jesus, being a Jew, remember, Jesus was born a Jew, He died a Jew. And therefore for Him, what was important for the Jews, He continued holding that importance also for Him. That's why when He asked Him what is the first commandment, the first commandment, He said, is quoting actually from the book of Deuteronomy, from today's first reading. He quoted and said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord God alone is your God," or "the Eternal One is our God, the eternal God alone, and Him alone you will worship." This young man had not asked for the second commandment, but Jesus immediately adds the second commandment, and to love your neighbor as yourself. This is very important to connect these two things and hold these two things together. Although this commandment of love your neighbor as yourself is also found in the Old Testament from the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verses 18. This commandment is there. So actually, Jesus was reminding the people that this is already what is given in the Old Testament, to love your neighbor as yourself. So don't remain only with the first commandment that Israel, hear, O Israel, eternal God is your God and He alone is God, and forget about the rest. See, this is the smartness of Jesus in one sense, but also the importance that Jesus wants to place with regard to the love of your neighbor. And therefore I'm standing here before the picture of Saint Vincent de Paul, as well as here is the saint who co-founded with him, Sister Louise Marillac. These two saints are famous for having loved the neighbor as oneself. Though these were not the very first ones, there were other saints before them who loved their neighbor, who gave everything up for Christ, who did really go out of their way and sacrifice their total self. But thereafter, there have been so many others. In the month of August, we also celebrated the feast of Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who gave his life. Remember in that Nazi camp, when a family man was supposed to be killed, he offered his own life. That is the love of the neighbor that Jesus is talking about. But what is to be emphasized is that love of the neighbor can never be separated from the love of God. These two things go hand in hand. It is always good for us to keep at the back of our mind that it is not enough for us to just go to the church and pray. As Jesus also said somewhere else, it is not those who call me Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven, but those who do the will of my Father. And the will of the Father is now expressed by Jesus in the second commandment, which is like the first, he says. So if you are claiming to love God, if you claim to be a pious person, if you claim to be holy, and if you claim or are attempting to go through a holy life, then remember that you have to love your neighbor. And Jesus had a particular love and special love for the poor and the oppressed. And what St. Vincent de Paul shows us, that he had special love for the poor. Remember the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, even now in many parishes, they work for the poor. Mother Teresa continued doing that, but there are many other saints. And that is the crux of Christianity and our religion. So, while we honor God as one God and Him alone, we do not forget our neighbor. I am sure you too will find your way of loving God and finding union with God by loving your neighbor. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.